The moment she stepped into the gun store, a deafening silence hit the air. Then laughter erupted, sharp and cruel, slicing through the room like glass. "Who let her in?" someone sneered, pointing directly at her. Her heart thumped, fast, uneven, threatening to betray every ounce of courage she'd clung to. She froze for a second, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to will herself invisible, but the laughter only grew louder, mocking every step she took. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, sneering, dismissing her like she was nothing more than a shadow in their world. The fear bubbled up, hot and suffocating, but beneath it, was a simmering anger, slow, deliberate, sharpening with each cruel giggle. She refused to look away. She wouldn't. Not yet. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the firearm display, each step measured, deliberate, a silent challenge to the mockers. "You think you can intimidate me?" she muttered under her breath, barely audible. But the room responded not with respect, not with caution, but with renewed laughter, louder, crueler. Someone whispered something nasty, and it carried across the polished floor, sticking to her skin like ice. She clenched her jaw, breathing in sharply, trying to steady her trembling fingers. The anger flared now, hotter than fear, an ember ready to ignite a blaze. This wasn't just about being laughed at, it was about being erased, ignored, dismissed, and she wouldn't allow it any longer. Then, the door burst open. Not a timid entrance, not a polite arrival. Bam! The sound echoed through the store, like a gunshot of authority and power. Every head snapped toward the doorway, mouths falling open in unison. Standing there, tall, unyielding, with a presence that commanded silence before it even spoke, was the commander. "At ease," he barked, his voice rolling over the room like thunder, yet carrying a calm, terrifying precision beneath it. The mockers froze mid-laugh, their bravado evaporating instantly, replaced with confusion, fear, disbelief. He didn't walk slowly, he stormed in, boots hitting the floor with a rhythmic menace that made the fluorescent lights seem dimmer, the air heavier, every heartbeat thudding in sync with his steps. Her eyes widened, not in fear now, but recognition. There was history here, unspoken, undeniable, invisible threads pulling the moment taut with tension. The commander's gaze swept the room, cold, precise, and merciless, landing briefly on each person who dared to smirk or whisper. "Shh!" The laughter died in their throats. Every ounce of cocky confidence drained, replaced with a sudden, choking anxiety. Then emotion, a subtle, imperceptible signal from the commander to her, and the air shifted. Something was about to happen, something no one could anticipate. And then it happened. Not a threat, not a word, not a gesture anyone expected. A slow, deliberate salute, but with a twist. The commander's hand hovered, paused, and then he spoke her name, louder than anyone could believe. "Private Morgan." The room went utterly silent. Every person froze, their mouths hanging open, eyes wide with disbelief. Their laughter, their mockery, their smug confidence, gone. It was replaced with awe, confusion, and a whisper of fear. She felt it too, a shiver, electric, running down her spine. She didn't just enter the store, she had entered a moment that would change the air itself, bend it around her in ways no one had ever imagined. The mockers, the sneerers, the whispered cruel jokes, they had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Their faces paled as the commander's eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned each of them. The slow build of tension was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Every second stretched, drawing out their panic, amplifying the humiliation that had just transformed into something else, something much, much darker. They tried to speak, tried to recover, but every word caught in their throats, choked by an invisible hand, a suffocating reality that no one had prepared them for. Her heart pounded, not from fear, not anymore, but anticipation. She knew the story had just begun. The anger in her veins, the fear, the humiliation, they all fused into something sharp, something ready to slice through the air. The commander was not just here to salute, he was here to awaken. And she, Private Morgan, standing amidst this sudden silence, felt the fire ignite. It wasn't just her battle now, it was theirs. The room, once filled with mockery and sneers, was now a cage of suspense, every mind trapped in the same taut thread of uncertainty. And she could almost hear it, the whispered truth that would rip through this place, leaving everyone changed, stunned, and powerless to look away. The commander's gaze didn't waver, sharp as a blade cutting through the thick, humid tension in the room. He didn't just stand there, he moved, each step deliberate, precise, filling the space with a weight that made the air itself tremble. "Enough," he barked, a single word that shattered the fragile veil of arrogance that the mockers had wrapped themselves in. Their eyes darted nervously, trying to find a foothold, a way to reclaim their pride, but there was none. Every ounce of their confidence drained instantly. They had underestimated him, underestimated her, underestimated the invisible thread that connected them both. Private Morgan felt her pulse hammer in her ears, almost deafening, as the laughter died and silence swallowed the room. She wanted to scream, shout, demand, anything, but the words froze. Instead, she took a deep breath, grounding herself, feeling the fire of anger mingle with a strange surge of power. For the first time, she understood that this wasn't just about being mocked, it was about rewriting the narrative, about shifting the balance in ways no one here could predict. The commander's presence was a statement, a declaration that the room had no control over what was coming next. And then, unexpectedly, he turned his attention fully to her. Not a glance, not a nod, but a moment so heavy with meaning that the air seemed to thrum around them. "Morgan," he said again, his voice a low rumble, full of authority and something more, a recognition that went beyond rank, beyond protocol. Her heart skipped, a flash of memory, a flicker of understanding passing between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but the tension it created was seismic. The people who had been laughing before now recoiled, sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond their comprehension. Her fingers twitched, the tremor of fear replaced with a sharpened resolve. She would not back down. She could not. The anger that had been simmering now surged, an unstoppable pint ready to crash through the fragile walls of mockery and doubt. And as the commander moved closer, the room seemed to shrink around them. The once mocking crowd reduced to spectators, powerless, their whispers now trapped in their own throats. Every breath felt heavy, electric, as if waiting for the inevitable strike that would redefine the room. Suddenly, a sound, subtle at first, caught her attention. The soft click of a weapon being lifted, a shift in the air that signaled readiness. The mockers hadn't anticipated the stakes. They were still anchored in their arrogance, unaware that the balance had shifted entirely. Her eyes flicked to the display of firearms, her mind calculating, measuring the weight of every possible move, every possible reaction. The room held its breath, each second stretching impossibly long, until the tension became almost unbearable. Then, with a deliberate motion, the commander raised his hand, not threatening, not demanding, but commanding attention in a way that froze everyone in place. "Do you see them?" he asked, voice low but carrying across the room, cutting through the silence like a sharpened blade. The mockers glanced at each other, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They didn't know who "them" referred to, and the ambiguity sent a ripple of panic through their group. Morgan's heart raced. She understood immediately. This was more than a simple salute, more than a dramatic entrance. This was a challenge, a signal that the unseen past and the hidden power she carried were about to collide with the ignorance of the present. Every second ticked with an unbearable intensity. And then it happened, the first true twist. The commander's hand fell, not in salute, not in greeting, but in a movement so sudden, so unexpected, that the mockers staggered back instinctively. A subtle, almost imperceptible posture, a barely noticeable gesture, and yet it carried authority, menace, and an unspoken warning that left every person frozen in place. The air itself seemed to quiver, charged with a power that no one had imagined. Morgan felt the surge of adrenaline, the mix of fear and exhilaration that comes when you know the rules of the game have changed, and that you hold a piece of the power that defines the next move. The mockers' faces turned pale, eyes darting, searching desperately for a foothold that didn't exist. Every whisper they thought would sway the room was swallowed, replaced by a heavy, almost tangible dread. "You will remember this moment," the commander's voice boomed, low and unyielding, and in that instant, Morgan felt the room tilt, the walls contract, the very atmosphere bend around her. The laughter, the arrogance, the false bravado, all of it was gone, evaporated in the sheer presence of authority and an unspoken truth that no one else could grasp. Her anger and fear fused into a single, unbreakable resolve. The mocker's silence was deafening now, the air thick with disbelief and mounting panic. Every step the commander took resonated through the polished floor, a rhythmic warning that seemed to synchronize with the rapid beating of Morgan's heart. Her mind raced, fast, slow, fast, trying to predict what would come next, knowing deep down that prediction was futile. She could feel the subtle energy of the room shift, the invisible lines of power bending toward her, the same lines that had once left her trembling in fear, now igniting a wild, burning determination. Then, in one swift motion, the commander turned fully toward her, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. "You've waited long enough," he said, voice low, dangerous, yet strangely comforting. Her chest tightened, a mix of fear, recognition, and something unspoken between them, an invisible tether forged by unshared battles and silent promises. She swallowed hard, nodding imperceptibly, a spark of understanding passing between them that no one else could see. The mockers didn't notice. They didn't dare. Suddenly, a low murmur ran through the crowd, whispers of disbelief, whispers of panic. "Who is she really?" someone breathed, barely audible, but enough to ripple through the room. Morgan's anger flared again. No, not just anger, but a resolute force, sharp and unrelenting. Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag, her jaw clenched, and for the first time she allowed a subtle smile, the kind that promised consequences, change, reckoning. The commander's slight nod encouraged her, signaling that the moment had arrived. Every second now was a countdown, invisible but terrifyingly real. Without warning, the commander's movement shifted, fast, deliberate, and completely unexpected. He gestured to the mockers, a single silent command that left them frozen, eyes wide, mouths opening and closing in shock. The tiniest flick of his wrist, a tilt of his head, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the weight of authority heavier, the air itself electric. Morgan felt it too, a current of energy, charged, humming, ready to explode into action. Her fear melted into a sharpened clarity. She was no longer just the victim of their mockery. She was the pivot of the room, the hidden force that would redefine the rules entirely. Then came the final, subtle twist, the thing no one saw coming. The commander lowered his hand from its poised, authoritative gesture, paused for a heartbeat, and then saluted her, not formally, not politely, but in a way that carried the weight of shared history, unspoken battles, and mutual respect. The room collectively inhaled, as if the air itself had been sucked out, leaving nothing but the sound of disbelief. Every mocker's smirk was replaced with a frozen mask of awe, uncertainty, fear. Morgan's pulse raced, her mind sharp, every muscle poised, and she understood this was the beginning, not the end, of something monumental. Her lips moved, almost involuntarily, forming words that carried both defiance and quiet triumph. "I'm not who you think I am," she said, voice low but clear, cutting through the heavy tension. The commander's eyes gleamed with acknowledgement, a silent approval that emboldened her further. The room seemed to shift around them, the mocker's arrogance crumbling in the face of a force they could neither see nor predict. Every heartbeat stretched, slow, fast, jittering, until the suspense was unbearable. And then, just as suddenly, the commander's voice thundered again. "Remember this lesson. Nothing is ever as it seems." Morgan's anger now mingled with exhilaration, and for the first time she stepped forward fully into the center of the room, her presence impossible to ignore. The mockers recoiled, stumbling backward, as if the floor itself had betrayed them. Every whispered insult, every cruel glance they had cast, bounced back with invisible force, magnified and directed. The commander gave her a final subtle nod, a gesture loaded with promise and warning, and the tension in the room reached its peak, electric, unbearable, unforgettable. She wasn't just in the gun store anymore. She was the storm. The room was still thick with tension, the echoes of laughter long vanished, replaced with a quiet so heavy it felt like lead pressing against their chests. Morgan's breathing slowed, her chest rising and falling in shallow, controlled movements. But inside her mind, everything was screaming. Why now? Why here? Her eyes flicked to the commander, sharp and unblinking, every line of his posture radiating authority. But there was something else, something underneath, something familiar, something that made her stomach twist. Memories, sharp and jagged, clawed at the edges of her mind, refusing to stay buried any longer. Flashback. It was years ago, long before the mockery, before the store, before anyone knew their names. The world had been a harsher place then, colder, unyielding, and she had been only a girl thrust into chaos. The commander, no longer just a figure of authority, but a presence, a force, had appeared then, in a storm of violence and fear. He had saved her from something terrible, something she had never been able to speak aloud. His hands had steadied hers, his voice had cut through the panic, commanding obedience and survival simultaneously, and she had followed, blindly, dangerously, because there was no other choice. She remembered the nights after, the training, the whispered instructions in dark alleys, in shadows that stretched longer than any light could touch. "You are stronger than you know," he had told her, his voice low, commanding, almost harsh, but beneath it an edge of care she had never admitted to herself. The bond had grown quietly, fiercely, invisibly, like roots winding under stone. No one knew, not her colleagues, not her friends, not the mocking fools in the gun store. It was theirs alone. And now, seeing him stride into that room, every motion deliberate, every eye watching, she felt the weight of it crash over her like a wave she had no way to escape. "Morgan." The commander's voice snapped her back to the present, low, dangerous, yet laced with something softer, almost impossibly tender. She caught the flicker of recognition in his eyes, a spark of history that belonged to another world, another time, another life. And suddenly, the mockers weren't just irrelevant, they were invisible. The store, the laughter, the sneers, they existed on a different plane entirely, inconsequential compared to the force connecting them. The anger, the fear, the tension, they all twisted into something new, something powerful. Her mind raced, slow at first, then fast, a tidal wave of recollections and revelations. She remembered the night he had risked everything to keep her safe, the narrow alleyways, the whispered warnings, the life-and-death decisions made in the blink of an eye. Every movement he made now, in the present, mirrored something she had known back then, a language of glances, subtle gestures that spoke of loyalty, survival, and a bond forged in fire. Her pulse pounded, an angry, relentless rhythm, her chest tight with the recognition of the depth of their connection. And then the first shocking revelation struck, sudden and brutal. The commander's presence, his protective stance, the weight of his authority, Everything was not just about decorum or discipline, it was personal. Every subtle motion, every precise word was a calculated effort to shield her, to guard the secret of their past, and to assert control over the chaos that had erupted in that small gun store. The mockers had no idea the depth of what they were witnessing, their arrogance, their laughter. They had been blind to the invisible history, the silent wars, the dangers faced together in shadows that had left marks on both of them, unseen but indelible. Morgan felt a tight knot of anger and disbelief coil in her stomach. Why had no one ever acknowledged this? Why had their bond been hidden, whispered in shadows, never spoken of openly? She could see it now, the weight of secrecy, the careful control of information, the strategic silence that had preserved not just her life, but the edge of power they shared. The mockers were nothing. They were spectators to a narrative far bigger than themselves, unaware that every smirk, every whisper, every laugh was being absorbed and catalogued by a force they could not comprehend. The commander's gaze swept across the room again, a storm of authority and unspoken history in every glance. And then, fast, sudden, impossible to predict, he gestured sharply toward the display, a subtle yet commanding motion, as if to warn the crowd, to redirect their focus. Whispers of panic ran through the group, flickers of fear, as they sensed an invisible weight pressing down upon them. Morgan's hands twitched, her instincts screaming in tandem with the memories flooding her mind. This wasn't just an entrance, a salute, or a display of power. It was a carefully orchestrated demonstration of history, memory, and unspoken loyalty, all converging in this one moment. The emotional crescendo hit next. Memories collided with the present, nights of terror, shared hardships, moments of silent understanding in the face of danger. Her voice, caught in her throat, nearly escaped in a whisper. "We survived, because of you, because of us." The commander's eyes softened for a microsecond, a fleeting glimmer of recognition and affirmation before hardening again to steel. Every motion he made, every word, was now layered with this unspoken truth. The mockers were irrelevant. They couldn't possibly understand. Then came the internal shouting, rapid fire, almost uncontainable. How could they be so blind? How could they mock what they can't see? How could they not know that power, loyalty, and survival sometimes travel in silence, unseen, unacknowledged? The words hammered through Morgan's mind, fast and slow, punctuated by bursts of anger and disbelief. Her hands clenched, every muscle taut with anticipation, every nerve screaming readiness. The room itself seemed to pulse with her internal storm, as if the memories themselves had injected electricity into the air. A sudden, fast-paced dialogue erupted. One of the mockers, shaking, tried to speak, tried to reclaim some semblance of control. Who are you really?" The question, pitiful and terrified, echoed across the store. Morgan's lips curved in a subtle, dangerous smile. "More than you'll ever know," she said, voice calm but lethal, each word carrying the weight of shared history, hidden wars, and secrets that would forever remain untouchable to the ignorant. The commander's nod confirmed it silently. Yes, this was their moment, and it would leave everyone watching forever altered, stunned by the revelation they could not even begin to comprehend. And then the twist, shocking, brutal, and inevitable. The past, once invisible, now became the lens through which the present had to be seen. Every action in the store, every subtle gesture of protection, every unyielding stance, the entire narrative shifted. The commander hadn't just arrived to correct behavior, he had arrived to reclaim history, to enforce consequences for ignorance, and to honor a bond that had been forged in fire, blood, and survival. Morgan felt the power of that revelation wash over her, a tide so strong it threatened to sweep away all doubt, all fear, all hesitation. The air in the gun store was electric, every heartbeat synchronized with the tension that gripped the room. Morgan stood at the center, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her eyes blazing with determination. Every mocking face from before now seemed smaller, weaker, trembling under the weight of authority and history they had failed to recognize. "This ends now," she shouted, voice carrying through the store like a whip cracking against stone. The commander's presence behind her was a wall of steel, unmovable and relentless, and together they radiated a force that none of the mockers had ever imagined. The room itself seemed to contract, pressing the audience into every inch of suspense, every shadow alive with anticipation. The first attack came not with fists, not with words, but with disbelief. One of the sneering men lunged, desperate, wild-eyed, thinking that chaos could be reclaimed. "Stop!" the commander's voice boomed, low and cutting, and the man froze mid-step, every muscle locked, his arrogance evaporating instantly. Morgan's own hands flexed, trembling with energy and anger, ready to act, ready to defend, ready to command the room's narrative. The mockers had assumed control, assumed superiority, but they were gravely, dangerously mistaken. Every step, every glance, every breath now carried consequence, and Morgan knew she had the upper hand. The drama escalated as a chorus of frantic voices filled the store, whispering, panicking, attempting to regain authority they no longer possessed. "Who is she really?" someone gasped, horror and awe mingling in equal measure. Morgan's smile was subtle, sharp, dangerous. "Someone you underestimated, someone you should have feared," she hissed, voice low but electric, every word slicing through the air with precision. The commander's nod reinforced the unspoken history, the shared battles, the secret victories, the silent wars they had fought together, now ready to manifest in the open. A sudden, rapid burst of movement shattered the tense stillness. Morgan darted forward, precise, lethal, a force barely contained. The mockers recoiled instinctively, unable to predict or counteract her momentum. The commander moved in tandem, a silent guardian, each step calculated, each gesture commanding attention. The combination of their power, history, and unyielding resolve created an invisible trap around the room. Panic and awe rippled through every person present, their smirks replaced with stark terror. The air vibrated with anticipation, as if the building itself had become a living witness to the confrontation. And then, the twist no one expected. One of the mockers reached for a firearm, their desperation manifesting in a sudden, reckless motion. Time slowed. Morgan's eyes locked, her mind calculating 1,000 possibilities in a heartbeat. The commander's hand shot out, a blur, catching the motion with effortless precision, and the weapon was disarmed before anyone could even blink. Gasps filled the room, voices stammering, disbelief etched across every face. Morgan felt her adrenaline spike, a mix of exhilaration, fear, and satisfaction. The mockers were learning, painfully and quickly, that appearances are deceiving, and they had misjudged everything. A hush fell over the store, thick and heavy, only punctuated by rapid breaths and whispered disbelief. Morgan took a slow, deliberate step forward, each movement measured, exuding authority and control. "Did you think this was about me?" she asked, voice rising, layered with anger and triumph. "It was never about me. It was about all of you, realizing that your arrogance has consequences." The commander's gaze swept the room, silent but commanding, a weight that pressed on every soul, making each person acutely aware of the magnitude of their mistakes. The emotional tension twisted, pulled taut until it felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, the final twist, the revelation that would leave everyone frozen in disbelief, unfolded. One of the mockers, desperate and defiant, tried to escape the room, hoping to salvage a shred of dignity. The commander's hand shot out, and with a flick, subtle yet terrifying, the door locked silently. No one could leave. No one could interfere. Every heartbeat, every glance, every tremor in the air was a reminder that this was no ordinary confrontation. Morgan's own voice rose, sharp and commanding. "This is your moment to witness what real courage looks like." The crowd, powerless and stunned, could do nothing but watch as history, hidden and potent, unfolded in front of their eyes. Fast and furious dialogue erupted next, a chaotic symphony of emotion. "You can't! This isn't fair!" one mocker screamed, disbelief and fear woven into every syllable. "Fair?" Morgan barked, stepping closer, eyes blazing, her presence impossible to ignore. "Nothing about survival, power, or truth is fair. You learned that today." The commander's quiet, menacing hum of approval followed, a subtle but undeniable reinforcement that their combined force was unstoppable. Every whisper, every gasp, every desperate movement of the crowd was absorbed, controlled, and rendered irrelevant by the undeniable authority of history, power, and courage displayed in perfect synchrony. Morgan's mind raced, slow, fast, slow, each thought punctuated with memory and action. She remembered every shared secret, every unspoken lesson, every silent promise forged with the commander in moments of danger and survival. This was the culmination, the apex, the undeniable proof that history, courage, and loyalty could not be mocked or dismissed. And as she moved, as the commander shifted, as the mockers reeled under the weight of revelation and consequence, the story reached a crescendo, every heartbeat syncing with the unstoppable force that had been unleashed in that small, confined space. And then, the final seconds of confrontation brought an almost cinematic tableau. Morgan standing tall, fierce, resolute, her eyes locked on each person who had doubted her. The commander shadowed behind her, a wall of unwavering strength and silent fury. Every whisper, every stuttered gasp, every frozen face reinforced the truth they had failed to see. Power, courage, and history are not to be underestimated. And in those frozen moments, a subtle emotional current pulled through the tension, a gentle, almost imperceptible reminder of humanity, of connection, and of respect earned through fire and struggle. And then, softly, almost tenderly, Morgan's voice cut through the suspense. If this story touched you, if my courage or our fight made even a spark in your heart, then I ask you, please support us, subscribe, leave a like, and share where in the world you're watching from. Your voice fuels our journey. The mockers could not respond. The tension remained, and yet the call to the audience was seamless, a bridge from intense drama to real-world engagement, a perfect blend of story and channel connection.